Ever since I was a little kid, I've always had a weird fascination with multi-storey car parks. I don't know what it is about them. I suppose because I grew up in a small town, the novelty value when visiting a big city played a big part. But there's more to it than that. To this day, one of my favourite things to do if I'm in a city centre and I need a break is grab a sandwich and go to the top floor of a multi-storey car park. Usually it's pretty quiet up there, even on busy days, and you can often get some very pleasant views of the surrounding city. So being a bit of a car park aficionado, I thought I'd rank all the multi-storey car parks in Aberdeen. Now, I don't actually own a car, so my rankings won't be based on the car park's actual utility as a place to park cars. Instead, I'll just sort of be going on general vibes. If you think that's a silly idea for a video, then, well, with the benefit of hindsight, I probably agree with you, but I've already filmed all the footage, so it's too late now. So without further rationalising, I give you the official Aberdeen multi-storey car park tier list. Let's get on with our first entry. Lady Helen Parking Centre. Let's start with what I think is the newest car park on this list, having opened in 2018 to replace the completely inadequate street-level car park that formerly served Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. It was built thanks to a donation from Ian and Helen Wood through their charitable foundation, which, to be honest, is a much better use of their money than paving over Union Terrace Gardens like they almost got away with a decade ago. On paper, this ought to be a great car park for scenery, a 13-storey building in one of the highest altitude parts of Aberdeen. But in reality, it's smack bang in the middle of the hospital complex, so you can mostly just see other parts of the hospital. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, there are some interesting looking hospital buildings, but the other issue is this tall fence that surrounds the entire perimeter of the top floor. Looking through a gap in the fence, you can see all the way out to sea on a clear day, but this wasn't a clear day, so... On the plus side, they have a nice fast lift, it's an eco-disc for those keeping score at home, and being pretty new, everything's still nice and clean, etc. I don't hate the design of the building either, but it just doesn't look lived in. It's all a bit clean and sterile for me. Then again, I suppose that's what you want for a hospital car park. My instinct is to give it a C, just because it's not that interesting a building and the views aren't as good as I was expecting. But on the other hand, it's a building that literally saves lives, so I suppose that's worth something. B tier. Frederick Street. Another relatively new car park, Frederick Street was opened in 2012 to support the newly opened health village across the street, which I'm sure anyone who's had to have certain tests done will be very familiar with. Annoyingly, they seem to have ripped out the lift, so I had to drag my corpse up the pishy stairs instead. Bit weird for a hospital car park not to have any disabled access. Anyway, looking at the roof, you can see it doesn't have a very big footprint, but it's pretty tall. You can see for miles, all the way out to sea, as well as almost Torry Battery to the southeast, and even the view of the surrounding city isn't too bad. You can even see down onto this former school, which was unusual as it had a playground on its roof, hence the high walls and fencing. I reckon I'll put Frederick Street in the B tier. It probably has the best view of any city centre car park north of Union Street, but the building itself is pretty dull and the lack of the lift is a pain in the arse. Chapel Street. Chapel Street's a solid workhorse of a car park that's great for hitting up the restaurants near the top of Union Street. Until a couple of years ago, it was getting pretty shabby. However, at the start of 2023, it reopened after a £1.2 million refurbishment, and it looks a lot prettier now. They've even cleaned the outside of it. There's some reasonably wide views of the cityscape from the roof, but being slap bang in the middle of a built-up area, there isn't really much to see. Bonus points though for having a cock in the stairwell. Let's say D tier. NCP Shiprow. Alright, this is a car park with some history. It was originally attached to a branch of What Everyone Wants, which was a Scottish discount shop chain that went bust in 2002. The whole shop was demolished, as well as parts of the car park and, most tragically, Joy nightclub, which was actually the first club I ever went to at the age of 18. In its place, we got an Ibis hotel and a Pure Gym, but the car park was left more or less intact. You can get to it from Virginia Street, Shiprow, or best of all, Union Street, by going up these slightly wobbly steps to the left of the Grosvenor Casino, which takes you straight to the top level. Probably my favourite way to get to the harbour from Union Street. Now, it's not a massive car park in terms of footprint, but it's pretty tall, so there are some fantastic views of the harbour and the nearby historic buildings. You can even see almost out to Torry Battery on a clear day. Unfortunately, this car park's height has made it famous for a much darker reason, which is why there are posters advertising the Samaritans on the railing. But overall, I think this is a great and these days sadly overlooked car park. Solid A tier. Marischal College. Unless you work for the council, you might not even know this car park exists, but it's open to the public. You just come down Queen Street towards the old police station and turn left. It could be a useful car park if you're seeing an early show in the Lemon Tree or Art Centre or something. It was presumably built at the same time that Marischal College was gutted and turned into the Aberdeen City Council headquarters. But apart from its relative obscurity, there isn't really much to say. Despite only being around 15 years old, half of it was locked off, I think, due to roof damage, and there was a lot of water leaking to the lower levels. The views aren't particularly spectacular either, unless you're a big fan of Premier Inns. I'm almost tempted to give it an F tier just because of how boring it is, but just because of how obscure it is, I'm going to bump it up to a D. Commercial Quay. Here's another one that you probably won't know about unless you work nearby. Certainly that's the only reason I know about it. Even the entrance is kind of hard to find. Instead of going all the way down Commercial Quay, you have to head up this unassuming street between the Regent Centre and the Salvesen Tower. But is it worth it? Well, yeah, I reckon. There's some lovely views of the harbour, and all the way out to Torry in the distance. The view north is blocked by the Regent Centre, but if you go to the top of the car park for the nearby Salvesen Tower, you could probably get a nice view of Regent Quay. The Northlink Shetland ferry was in the way when I visited, though. While you're there, check out this banging mural in the Regent Centre. Anyway, I reckon Commercial Quay car park deserves a B tier. Maybe that would be bumped up to an A if you include the Salvesen Tower car park on a day when the harbour is less busy. I think it might be private property though, so don't blame me if you get yelled at. Denburn. Now this is a stone-cold classic Aberdeen car park. It was built in the mid-1970s alongside the Denburn Court housing block, until recently had a health centre on its upper floors. It's certainly seen better days in terms of maintenance, but it still seems to be really popular, probably the busiest car park I visited that day, which makes sense as it's in a pretty useful place for stuff like His Majesty's Theatre and the Art Gallery. One of the things I like about brutalist architecture like this is the massive concrete surfaces make a sort of blank canvas for graffiti and other street art. I'm not really an aficionado, but some of the throw-ups in the Denburn aren't half bad in my uninformed opinion, certainly the best of any car park in Aberdeen. The stairwells are a bit pishy, but if anything that adds to the atmosphere. The real gem of Denburn car park though, that you might not even know about unless you're a skater, is this bizarre concrete jungle on its roof. I'm not sure exactly what function this area was supposed to serve, but certainly for as long as I've lived in Aberdeen it's been a skate spot, as you can see in this video from 1991. Definitely an S tier car park. It's the filthy underdog of Aberdeen and I love it. Bonaccord Loch Street. This car park is part of the Bonaccord Shopping Centre, which was an enormous structure that essentially took over the entire bottom end of George Street when it was built in the late 1980s. Honestly, if you look at the before and after pictures, they demolished a huge chunk of Aberdeen to build this thing. But we're not here to debate the relative merits of urban renewal, we're here to nerd out over car park, and Loch Street is a doozy as the Americans would say. You see, Loch Street isn't just one car park, it's more like 4 car parks in a trench coat. The actual main car park itself is pretty unremarkable really. If you go to the top floor, the roof is covered over so it just feels like all the other floors. But there is this exit leading to the outside. This is actually an overhead driveway going over Loch Street and onto another car park on the roof of the adjacent Norco House, better known in recent years as the old John Lewis building. Norco House was built decades before the Bonaccord Centre, and I can only assume didn't originally have a car park on its roof, as I don't know how cars could possibly have got up there. The whole setup with the road bridge and car park was presumably added as part of the Bonaccord Centre's construction. After John Lewis shut, access to the car park on its roof was closed, so this footage comes courtesy of my mate Rob, who works for Bonaccord and definitely had permission to be there. But yeah, it gives some lovely views of George Street and the surrounding city. Sorry for the shaky footage, it was super windy that day and I'm terrified of heights. I mean, Rob is. But that's not all. In 2009, the Bonaccord Centre asexually reproduced. This involved demolishing a couple of buildings on Gallowgate and replacing them with a large branch of Next with yet another car park on its roof. Unlike the main car park, this isn't covered, so you can see some of the surrounding city, but there isn't really much to see from here. There are some nice views of Marischal College, and a few years ago we witnessed Marischal Square being eaten by some kind of anime tentacle monster, probably for the best. There's also this little extra car park you can only get to from the first floor that always seems to be empty. I'm not sure if this is a staff-only car park, or if they just really decided they needed a dozen extra spaces on top of the hundreds they already have, but hey, now you know about it. Anyway, I think Bonaccord Loch Street deserves an S tier, just because of how many weird nooks and crannies there are and how it links to other nearby weird buildings. I've been talking about Loch Street for far too long now, but I do have many other interesting facts about this car park, so if you see me in the pub, buy me a pint and maybe I'll tell you. Bonaccord Harriet Street. You thought we were done with the Bonaccord Centre, didn't you? Well, we still have to cover Loch Street's underachieving brother, Harriet Street. It's a much smaller car park, and unfortunately pretty much devoid of interesting nooks and crannies. You can get some semi-decent views out over Robert Gordon's College and the old Broadford Works, but nothing too spectacular. Let's say, I don't know, D tier. ACP Hardgate. Here's a deep cut of a car park, the ACP on Hardgate. As well as being a public car park, it also serves the attached Park Inn Hotel, as well as the disgustingly opulent IQ building, which I believe at one point had the highest rental price per square foot of any building outside London. As might be expected from a car park this far off the beaten path, it was mostly empty, especially the parts reserved for businesses in the IQ building. I imagine at one point this section would have been filled to the brim with BMWs and Mercedeses, but not today, be that due to the decline in the oil industry, the popularity of working at home, or just the fact that this was a Saturday. Anyway, I'm going to give this an F, not just because it's boring and all the internal doors were locked, but because I used to do IT support for people who worked in the IQ building and they were all massive pricks. Trinity Centre. Alright, I'm just going to come out and say that I don't like this car park at all. Apart from anything else, their security really don't like you trying to walk up the car ramp, but that's by the by. My real issue with it though is that the Trinity Centre blocks off the southwards view of the Denburn Valley from Union Street. If you load up the city in Google Earth, you can kind of see what view would look like if it wasn't there. Okay, you'd also have to knock down Athol House, which has been empty for over a decade anyway, but then you'd be able to see clear over the train station and practically all the way to Torry. I mean, maybe it's not the prettiest view in the entire world, but it'd be much nicer than just the side of a building. I mean, everyone likes the view from Northbridge in Edinburgh, this could almost be that. That's not the only sin the Trinity Centre commits though. I'll link you to a fantastic video by fellow YouTuber Duthies about this, but TLDW, the traditional route into Aberdeen from the south was to come up Hardgate, down Windmill Brae, over a bridge across the Denburn and into the Green. This existed as a route for probably thousands of years, even after the Denburn was rerouted and replaced with railway lines, and it may surprise you to learn that it was only closed as a route in the last 10 years. You see, the aforementioned bridge across the Denburn was pulled down and basically replaced with the Trinity Centre. The centre straddles a railway line in Denburn Road in the same way as the previous bridge did. In fact, some of the stonework in the Windmill Brae entrance to the Trinity Centre actually dates back to the 19th century. When the Trinity Centre was first opened in 1984, they actually used to keep this entrance, as well as the entrance to the Green, open 24 hours a day. They'd just bring down barriers either side of the walkway after the centre closed to stop people getting into the car park. Sometime in the last decade or so, they started closing the Windmill Brae entrance in the evenings, and recently they don't seem to bother opening the Green entrance at all. So yeah, because of the Trinity Centre, literally a several millennia old route has been closed. And to top it all off, it's a boring car park with almost zero views of anything interesting. F tier. West North Street. Alright, this is a personal favourite of mine, being a massive fan of brutalist architecture, and also I pass through it every day on my way to work for over a decade. It reminds me quite a lot of the Denburn, in that it was built in the 1970s alongside the Seamount Court and Port Hill Court tower blocks, which are linked by this cool little double-decker walkway thing. The car park has a large flat area on its roof for, apparently, badminton, if the 2023 film Tetris is to be believed. Yes, West North Street is a movie star, having made a couple of cameo appearances along with the Aberdeen University Zoology building. The graffiti's much less impressive than Denburn though. I mean, I appreciate a good cock and balls as much as the next 12-year-old boy, but there just isn't much here. This dragon thing on the northern stairs is really cool though. I thought it was a ferret at first, but my partner tells me it's from the Never-Ending Story. Best of all, West North Street features this fantastic spiral ramp which I used to love cycling down on my way to work. On the downside, the views from the roof aren't great, although they're miles better than the nearby Marischal College car park. So overall, pretty interesting building, but the lack of graffiti and the mediocre views pull it back a wee bit. I want to give it an A tier because I have a soft spot for it, but if I'm being honest, it's a B tier at best. Union Square. Aberdeen's flagship shopping centre. I've never been too keen on it really. I mean, I love a dirty Cosmo as much as the next man, but when it comes to clothing I'm more of a Primark man. So, onto the car park. As well as a surface level outdoor car park, there's a multi-storey thing on top of the south end of the building. It's actually pretty nice. The top floor is spacious and open, and has some of the best views of any car park in the city, no matter which direction you look. To the east you can look out over Aberdeen's historic harbour. To the west there's a lovely view of Aberdeen's historic train station. Looking south you can see Aberdeen's historic boroughs of Torry and Concorth. And northwards you can see Aberdeen's historic shopping centre service yard, which, as it turns out, staff aren't too keen on you filming. Anyway, I reckon Union Square deserves a C. Considering the lovely views, it should probably have really been a B, but I'm going to penalise them for their security accosting me in Mankind while I was trying to do some last minute Christmas shopping. Like I said, they really don't like you filming the service yard. College Street. This is a car park that people seem to forget exists unless they're getting a train. I think mostly because the Union Square shopping centre car park has stolen its thunder. But for most people, College Street is actually easier to drive to than Union Square, particularly thanks to the bus gates on Guild Street, and it's so close to Union Square it might as well be part of it anyway. If you're a cyclist, it's also a much better place to stash your bicycle than the stands at Union Square. But this is getting dangerously close to an actual utilitarian review. What we want to know is, how are the vibes? Well, unusually for Aberdeen, it's made out of red bricks, which certainly makes it stand out in a city full of granite buildings. On top, there are some lovely views of the railway, and just like with Union Square, you can see all the way out to Torry on a clear day. This car park was a big skate spot at one time, but I don't know if that's still the case. Certainly there doesn't seem to be any of the telltale signs like truck nuts and roaches lying about. Possibly folks stopped using it after a tragic accident 20 years ago when local skater Sean McGee fell from the roof, as this mural on the ground floor commemorates. Anyway, I reckon College Street gets a B tier. Like, I almost want to give it an A because of the nice wide open view, but it just isn't that interesting a building overall. Nonetheless, a great car park. Honourable mention, the wee one behind Kittybrewster Shopping Centre. This isn't a multi-storey, but I really want to give it a shout out because it's really weird. Like, I think it's meant to be an overflow car park for the shopping centre, but the fact that it exists isn't signposted anywhere, and you're not very likely to find it by accident given you have to drive round the back of the centre and through all the loading bays. As a result, despite living in the area for nearly 15 years, I don't think I've ever seen any cars parked there. It looks especially creepy at night time, like the kind of place in films where illicit underground activities would happen. Except it's surrounded by a million security cameras and there's a police station round the corner, so probably not. Anyway, well worth a visit if you can find it. Maybe grab a burger from the van in the other car park and go have a picnic. Conclusion. So, what have we learned today? Well, apart from the fact that I really need to get back on my ADHD medication, apparently the best two car parks in Aberdeen are the Denburn and Bonaccord Loch Street. Unless you're looking for somewhere to actually park your car, in which case I wouldn't really recommend either of them. The worst two car parks are ACP Hardgate because of personal reasons and Trinity Centre because of historical reasons. They might actually be useful car parks though, I've no idea. Also, I thought I gave West North Street a B tier. I've clearly filled up the editing somewhere. Anyway, if you live in Aberdeen or Shire, what's your favourite multi-storey? And if you live elsewhere, then tell us about the car parks in your city. Maybe I'll take a trip if they're interesting enough. If you want to see more videos about Aberdeen, then like and subscribe. I've certainly got a few more ideas. Like maybe I'll rent a car and actually try parking in some of these car parks. Or maybe I'll make a bus gate survival guide or something. Who knows? But in any case, thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.